Damian Moretti came to his assistant's apartment to fire her, and his missing mother opened the door. Eleanor Moretti was supposed to be inside a private rehabilitation clinic in Switzerland beyond phones, visitors, and family arguments. Instead, she stood barefoot behind Vivian Cole, wearing a borrowed robe and gripping a red wedding route binder against her chest. Vivian had managed Damian's movements for 7 years, yet he had never asked how many disasters she erased before breakfast. Now, his fiancée waited in a ballroom. His mother was officially listed as confused, and the employee he treated as useful hands appeared to have hidden the most powerful woman in his family. Damian gave Vivian 60 seconds to explain. She looked at the armed men behind him and said, "If Serena gets that binder before your mother speaks, you will still have a wedding tonight. But by morning, none of this will belong to you." At 4:17 on Friday afternoon, Vivian Cole removed her nameplate from the desk outside Damian Moretti's office. She placed it in the bottom drawer with the spare cufflinks, the sealed headache tablets, and the list of 37 people. Damian would answer after midnight, even when he claimed he was unavailable. The ballroom 3 floors below was already glowing with white roses and champagne glass, but nobody had asked whether the woman who built the wedding schedule planned to attend. Serena Vale had answered that question for everyone during the final staff briefing. "Assistants should remain where they are useful," Serena had said, smiling at the planners gathered around the table. Her eyes had moved over Vivian's burgundy dress, pausing at the curve of her waist, as if elegance were a clerical error. The family photographs are already crowded. 2 coordinators had looked down at their tablets. Damian had continued reading the security summary. He had not laughed, but he had not corrected Serena either. Vivian had closed the route binder and asked whether the north elevator would remain reserved for Eleanor Moretti's arrival. Serena's smile had sharpened. "His mother is resting in Switzerland, Vivian. Her vote is scheduled for 8:30. "Then you scheduled a woman who will not be here." Damian had finally looked up. "Remove the slot." Vivian had held his gaze for 1 second longer than an assistant was expected to hold it. "The trust requires her physical confirmation unless a guardianship order is filed before the ceremony. I know my own trust. Then you know why the slot matters." The room had gone still in the uncomfortable way people became still when a worker reminded an owner that memory was not a system. Damian had closed the folder in front of him. "Remove it, Vivian." She had done exactly that. Then she had printed the final route packet, placed the red original in her work bag, and left the Moretti Grand Hotel for the first time before sunset in 7 years. 23 minutes later, Eleanor Moretti called from a pharmacy payphone 2 blocks from Vivian's apartment. Her voice was dry, frightened, and unmistakably clear. "They told my son I was in Zurich," she said. Vivian stopped beside a delivery van while traffic moved around her. "Where are you?" "Close enough to see your building." Vivian found Eleanor behind the pharmacy wearing soft clinic shoes and a grey coat too thin for the March wind. There was no luggage, no phone, and no security detail. There was only a paper bracelet on her wrist and the fury of a woman who had spent 40 years making powerful men listen. Vivian brought her upstairs, made tea, and called Damian's private number. The call diverted to Serena's wedding office. She tried the secure operations line. Damian's security chief answered and told her Mr. Moretti was not to be disturbed by former staff. Former staff. The phrase reached her 12 minutes before the dismissal notice appeared in her email. It accused Vivian of abandoning her position, removing protected routing material, and attempting unauthorized contact with a vulnerable family member. The message carried Damian's digital signature. Eleanor read it twice without touching the screen. Did my son write this? His credential approved it. That was not my question. Vivian turned the laptop so the older woman could see the authorization footer. "No," she said. Eleanor nodded once, as if Vivian had passed a test neither of them had discussed. "Good." At 6:12, while 600 guests began arriving for the rehearsal gala, Damian's armored sedan stopped outside Vivian's brick apartment building. He had learned that the red master binder was missing when a driver received 2 conflicting instructions for the same vehicle. Serena had called it theft. Security Chief Nolan Price had called it a possible extraction attempt. Damian called it a problem that should never have survived long enough to reach him. He climbed the narrow stairs with Nolan and 2 guards behind him. The hallway smelled of onions, laundry soap, and somebody's burned toast. It was the first place connected to Vivian that Damian had ever seen, and the ordinary warmth of it irritated him more than luxury would have. He knocked once. No one answered. He knocked again, harder. Locks moved on the other side. The door opened 4 inches. Eleanor Moretti looked through the gap at her only son. For the first time in 20 years, Damian forgot to control his face. Mother Eleanor opened the door wider. "You took your time." Damian's hand went beneath his coat before he stopped himself. There was no visible threat inside the apartment. There was Vivian in a burgundy dress with her shoes removed, a cup of cold tea on the table, and the red wedding route binder held against her ribs. Nolan moved forward. "Step away from Mrs. Moretti." Vivian did not move. Eleanor did. She placed herself between Nolan and the woman who had given her shelter. "If you point one more order at her," Eleanor said, "I will make certain you never work for this family again." Nolan glanced toward Damian. Damian watched Vivian instead. "Why is my mother here?" "Because someone moved her out of your protection network 3 weeks ago," Vivian said. "You expect me to believe you discovered that today?" "No." Her answer was calm enough to sound insolent. "I expect you to believe your mother when she tells you she escaped today." Eleanor lifted her bracelet. "I was never in Switzerland." The printed label named a local memory care facility owned by a Vale family subsidiary. Damian read the address, then looked at the binder. "Give me the roots." Vivian tightened her fingers around the red cover. "Not while Nolan is in the room." Nolan's expression changed before Damian's did. That small change was the first thing Vivian trusted. Damian ordered his guards into the hallway and left Nolan beside the door. Vivian shook her head. "He leaves too. You are in no position to set conditions. Then arrest me and explain to your mother why the man who approved her isolation is standing behind you." Nolan reached for the binder. Eleanor struck his hand with her walking stick. The sound was sharp, almost comic, but nobody smiled. Damian looked at the paper bracelet again. The facility name meant nothing to him, which meant somebody had successfully placed a Moretti asset beyond a Moretti map. That fact was more dangerous than Vivian's defiance. "Hallway," he told Nolan. "Sir, the route packet is protected material." "So is my mother." Nolan's jaw tightened. He stepped outside and Damian closed the door himself. Vivian did not hand over the binder. She set it on the kitchen table between 3 mugs and opened to the first page. The packet was not merely a list of cars and times. It was a living map of the Moretti organization during the 24 hours surrounding the wedding. Each movement showed a driver authorization level, passenger fallback location, and operational consequence. Vivian had designed the format after a funeral convoy was separated by a false police detour 5 years earlier. Damian had approved the cost without learning why the colored margins mattered. "Red pages are family routes," she said. "Blue pages are staff and vendors. I know what my own binder contains." "What does a gray footer mean?" Damian looked down. Every page carried a narrow gray line with a time terminal number and approval code. "Revision history." "Not history." Vivian tapped the footer. "Custody." She turned to page 14. Eleanor's original entry showed a flight from Zurich, a physician escort, and arrival through the North Garage at 7:40. A second version placed her in the Vale facility under court-authorized observation. The revision had been entered at 2:11 that morning, using Serena's wedding credential. Damian read the line twice. "Serena cannot authorize medical movement." Correct. Then the code is false. The permission is false. Vivian kept one finger on the page. The code is real. That distinction annoyed him because it sounded like a clerk protecting her terminology during a crisis. It also frightened him because Vivian was rarely wrong about a system she had built. How did a wedding credential enter the protected route network? "You granted Serena event-level access when she complained that my approvals delayed her planners." Event access does not reach family transport. It did after Nolan merged the wedding dashboard with the executive calendar. Eleanor lowered herself into a chair. I warned you about giving a bride the keys before she became family. Damian ignored the comment. Why did the system accept a medical move without a physician? Vivian turned to a pale strip running down the page. Because someone categorized your mother as ceremonial cargo. The words sounded obscene in the small kitchen. Under the wedding protocol, Damian had authorized ceremonial cargo could be rerouted by the event office during a security disruption. The category had been intended for rings, signed gifts, and family documents. It had never been intended for a person. Serena's credential had not broken the system. It had used the system exactly as written. Damian looked toward Eleanor. How did you leave the facility? A kitchen worker recognized me from a newspaper photograph. Where is she now? Fired, I imagine. Eleanor folded her hands to stop their trembling. They took my phone, said I had become confused after a fall, and presented papers carrying your office seal. Did a doctor examine you? Every morning. Name. Dr. Peter Vale, Serena's uncle. Damian's face became unreadable again, but the silence around him changed. Vivian had seen that stillness before negotiations ended badly for the other side. This time, she did not find it reassuring. Call the police, she said. No. Then call your family attorney and report Eleanor's location. Not until I know who can be trusted. That is how people become possessions inside private systems. His eyes lifted to hers. Be careful. I was careful for 7 years. Vivian's voice remained quiet. That is why you never saw the cost of your decisions. Damian closed the binder. You removed protected information and hid my mother. I protected an adult woman who asked me not to disclose her location to the people who can find her. You could have reached me. I tried. She showed him the diverted call and the dismissal notice. Damian recognized his digital signature, but he did not remember authorizing the message. He called his office from a number Serena did not know. His deputy answered on the second ring with panic barely contained beneath professional courtesy. 3 payroll batches had stalled. 2 drivers had received duplicate routes. The wedding florist was blocking a service entrance because no one had approved an alternate loading bay. The north elevator had been released to guests, trapping Eleanor's longtime housekeeper on a restricted floor. Each failure was small. Together they formed the shape of Vivian's absence. Where is Nolan? The deputy asked. Outside. He locked the red dashboard 20 minutes ago. Damian looked at the door. On whose authority? The authorization says yours. Damian ended the call. Vivian watched the answer settle into him. For years, he had treated her competence as a quiet extension of his own command. Now the system was failing in public, and the authority attached to every failure wore his name. You still think I stole the binder, she said. I think somebody wants me to believe you did. That is not the same as believing me. No. The honesty surprised them both. Damian placed his palm on the red cover but did not pull it away from her. What happens at 8:30? Eleanor answered before Vivian could. If I am declared incompetent, my trust vote passes to your wife. Damian's gaze moved to the clock. The rehearsal ceremony began in 76 minutes. From the hallway came the soft electronic sound of Nolan entering an override code. Vivian looked toward the lock. That code opens more than this door, she said. Damian opened the apartment door before Nolan completed the second override attempt. Nolan stood with a phone in one hand and a compact access device in the other. Security precaution, he said. Damian held out his hand. Nolan surrendered the device without argument, which made the surrender feel rehearsed. Who told you my mother was here? Damian asked. Vivian's building entry triggered a family proximity alert. Vivian stepped into view behind Damian. My building does not have Moretti sensors. Your work phone does. It has been on my office desk since 4:30. For the first time, Nolan's answer arrived late. Then, someone moved it. Damian handed the device to one guard. Take Nolan's weapons and keep him in the car. You are trusting an assistant over the man who has protected you for 11 years. I am trusting the delay before your last answer. Nolan looked past him at Eleanor. The facility reported Mrs. Moretti missing and medically unstable. Eleanor raised her chin. Did they report that before or after you found me? Nolan said nothing. Damian's guards escorted him downstairs. Vivian waited until the outer door closed. If Nolan is part of this, your hotel is no longer controlled space. He may be compromised without being part of it. That difference matters to Nolan, not to the people inside the building. Damian called a driver whose route could not be edited through the wedding dashboard. He ordered the car to the rear alley and told no one where they were going. Eleanor refused a hospital until she had spoken to the family attorney in person. Vivian packed the binder, Eleanor's bracelet, and a bottle of water. Damian watched her choose practical objects without asking permission. You planned for this, he said. I planned for an interrupted evening. There is cash in that envelope. Chicago paid relocation expenses in advance. He looked at her. You accepted the job. At 3:50 this afternoon. Before my mother called. Yes. The answer landed harder than accusation. Vivian had not threatened to leave, so he would value her. She had built a door and walked through it. Damian picked up her suitcase before she could reach it. This changes nothing between us. It changes my address on Monday. The driver took them to an unused Moretti accounting office above a closed restaurant. The room had no wedding network connection, no decorative flowers, and no staff Serena had selected. Vivian considered it safer than the hotel for approximately 9 minutes. Then the lights went out. Emergency bulbs glowed above the exits. Damian moved Eleanor behind a concrete partition while Vivian opened the route binder on the floor. Was this location listed? He asked. Not by name. Then how did they find it? They may not have found us. Vivian looked through the window at the buildings across the street. The entire block was dark. Someone cancelled the utility payment. Damian almost dismissed the observation as irrelevant. Then he remembered the stalled payroll batches. The accounting office, 3 warehouses and a garage shared one consolidated vendor account. Vivian had been the only person who checked exception notices before automatic suspension. When was the warning sent? Yesterday at 11:12? Why did I not see it? Because your inbox rules send vendor notices to operations. Your inbox. Formally. Eleanor gave her son a tired look. Your empire loses electricity 6 hours after you fire one woman. The payment was deliberately blocked. Vivian found the notice in her archived messages. Yes, but the sabotage only worked because everybody assumed I would repair it without mentioning it. That was the wound beneath Serena's insult and Damian's silence. Vivian's labor had become visible only when someone weaponized its absence. Damian called the utility through a direct corporate line and restored the block under emergency terms. The lights returned 9 minutes later. In those 9 minutes, the rehearsal gala received an automated notice stating that Damian had postponed the ceremony because his assistant had suffered an emotional incident and stolen confidential records. Serena sent the statement to family members, hotel executives, and 2 society reporters. She attached a photograph of Vivian leaving the hotel with the red binder. By the time the lights came on, Vivian's private job offer had been forwarded to Damian's board as proof she intended to sell operational secrets to a competitor. She is not defending herself, Eleanor said. She is defining Vivian before Vivian can enter the room. Damian read the message without expression. Serena does not know we have you. She knows enough to make anything I say sound like coaching, Vivian replied. Then we do not announce my mother yet. You want to use her as a surprise. I want to protect her testimony. Those are not automatically the same thing. Damian faced her. What would you do? It was the first time he had asked that question before giving an order. Vivian spread the route binder across the accounting table. I would test the system she thinks she controls. She selected a blue vendor page and changed the florist's loading route to a garage that did not exist. Then she created 3 versions of the change, each carrying a different internal distribution code. One went to Damian's deputy, one went to the hotel loading manager, the third went only to Serena's event dashboard. They waited 6 minutes. A wedding security alert appeared, warning guards that Vivian planned to enter through the non-existent garage with stolen documents. The alert repeated the exact false route sent only to Serena. Damian read it aloud. Eleanor's smile held no warmth. "There is your bride." Vivian shook her head. "There is her access." She turned the red binder to the final family page. "We still do not know what she intends to buy with it." Damian saw a fresh grey footer beneath his own wedding route. At 9:45 minutes after the trust vote, his car had been redirected away from the hotel to an unfinished river tunnel. The approval code was not Serena's. It belonged to Vivian Cole. Damian did not accuse Vivian. The restraint cost him enough that she could see it in the muscle beside his jaw. "Who can create an approval under your credential?" he asked. "Nobody without my hardware key." Vivian reached into her work bag and placed a small black token on the table. "It never leaves me. Nolan searched your office after you left. The key would not help him." "Why?" "Because I designed my credential to require a root sentence only I would recognize." Damian looked at the binder. "What sentence? If I tell you it stops proving the approval is false." He was accustomed to secrets becoming his property the moment he requested them. Vivian's refusal would once have registered as insubordination. Now it registered as disciplined custody. "Test it," he said. Vivian opened the protected root portal on an isolated laptop and entered her key. The screen displayed 5 ordinary questions about vehicles and passengers. She answered 4, then turned the laptop toward Damian. The final prompt asked for the color of the east stairwell at the old Bell Street depot. "Green," Damian said. Vivian entered blue. The system unlocked. "The stairwell is green. It was blue before the fire 14 years ago. You did not work for me then. My father did." Vivian rarely mentioned Arthur Cole, the Moretti dispatcher, who had died after getting 21 warehouse workers out of a burning building. Damian remembered sending flowers and a year of wages to the family. He did not remember that Arthur had left a daughter who would later sit outside his office for 7 years. "You built the question around him." "I built it around knowledge nobody could purchase from a personnel file." The false approval in the binder had passed without that answer. That meant it had not entered through Vivian's credential at all. It had been printed to look as if it had. Only the central root server could generate a page after bypassing identity validation, and only 2 roles could authorize that bypass. One belonged to Damian, the other belonged to Nolan Price. Damian called the guards, holding Nolan in the car. Nolan was gone. He had complained of chest pain, struck one guard when the door opened and disappeared into the evening traffic. Damian's first instinct was to order every Moretti crew in the city to find him. Vivian stopped him before he made the call. "If you flood the network, Serena learns we identified the bypass. She already knows Nolan failed. She knows he is missing from her messages." Vivian pointed to the grey footer. "She does not know we understand this." Damian set the phone down. "What do you need?" "A room inside the hotel that Serena believes is still connected to her dashboard. The old revenue office. Too close to the ballroom. You wanted access. I want controlled access. You are correcting every answer I give. You hired me to prevent expensive mistakes. I fired you. Then consider this unpaid criticism." Eleanor laughed for the first time that evening. Damian almost did. The moment passed when the family attorney called from the hotel and asked why Eleanor's guardianship petition had been advanced to 7:45. The petition was no longer tied to the 8:30 trust vote. Serena had moved the deadline forward by 45 minutes. The attorney had received a medical declaration signed by Dr. Vale and a security statement signed by Nolan. Both claimed Eleanor had been abducted by a former employee experiencing a personal crisis. Vivian's photograph and Chicago offer were attached. If the attorney accepted the emergency filing, Serena would control Eleanor's vote before the rehearsal ceremony began. Damian ordered him to stop the filing. "I cannot," the attorney said. "The request was submitted through your personal family directive. I am personally directing you now. Then appear in the boardroom and place the objection on record." Damian checked the time. They had 38 minutes. Returning to the hotel meant entering a system Serena controlled. Staying away meant allowing her to convert the appearance of authority into legal power. Vivian closed the red binder. We go back through the employee entrance. That route will be watched. Every executive route will be watched. Then why choose the employee entrance? Because Serena has never learned the names of the people who keep it open. Eleanor studied Vivian with quiet approval. That blind spot may be the only honest thing about her. They entered the Moretti Grand through the laundry dock at 7:19. Vivian knew the second shift supervisor, the boiler mechanic, and the woman who logged damaged linens. None of them asked why Damian Moretti was pushing a cart filled with folded tablecloths, while his mother walked beside Vivian in a borrowed housekeeping coat. They simply opened the correct doors. The contrast was not lost on Damian. His fiancée had spent 6 months selecting the people visible in the ballroom. Vivian had spent 7 years knowing the people who made the ballroom possible. Inside the old revenue office, she connected to the route server through a maintenance line Serena's dashboard did not display. The red binder showed Eleanor's supposed flight from Zurich, but the server still retained fuel and mileage assumptions for every protected trip. Vivian compared the numbers aloud. The vehicle assigned to collect, Eleanor, had been budgeted for 12 miles, not an airport transfer. The physician escort had no international travel allowance. The driver's meal line showed 1 local shift. The entire Switzerland story existed only in the passenger description. The operational data had always said Eleanor was being moved across town. Damian stared at the page. How did nobody see this? Because descriptions are written for executives, Vivian said. Costs are written for people expected to notice. She had just proven that Serena's lie was local, deliberate, and planned before the wedding. Then the maintenance screen flashed red. Someone inside the hotel had begun deleting the route archive 1 page at a time. Vivian disconnected the maintenance cable before the deletion reached the wedding packet. The screen went black, but the red binder remained open beneath her hand. The paper copy is now the only complete record, she said. Damian looked at the ordinary metal cabinet where she had placed it. Then it leaves with me. No, this is not a debate. That sentence is why Serena could use your name without using your judgment. Damian stepped closer. The old office was narrow enough that Vivian could feel the heat of him before he stopped. He had used proximity to end negotiations with men who believed fear was a form of respect. Vivian did not step back. If you carry the binder, she said, every guard assumes you control its meaning. I control the organization it describes. You did not recognize the mileage lie, the false credential, or the cargo classification. Her voice softened without becoming less firm. Possessing evidence is not the same as understanding it. Damian looked down at her fingers on the red cover. For 7 years, those hands had placed answers in front of him before he understood there had been questions. You keep it, he said. The concession was small enough that no one outside the room would have noticed. Vivian understood what it cost him. Thank you. Do not make gratitude sound like victory. Then stop making respect sound like defeat. Eleanor cleared her throat from the adjoining room. The 2 of you may finish discovering each other after I remain legally competent. The family attorney was waiting in the boardroom with 4 trustees, Serena Doctor. Vale and 20 invited witnesses from both families. Damian could enter openly and force a delay, but Vivian warned that delay alone would preserve Serena's version of events. They needed Eleanor's voice, the route binder, and proof that the printed approvals were generated through Nolan's bypass. The binder could demonstrate all 3 if Vivian preserved its custody. Every printed packet carried a sequence of tiny punch marks along the spine. The marks recorded the terminal printer and number of pages at the instant of production. Vivian's red binder contained 32 pages. The copies Serena had distributed contained 31. 1 page had been removed after printing, but the spine still recorded its existence. Which page? Damian asked. That is what the deletion was meant to hide. Vivian compared the index to the surviving tabs. Page 26 was missing. It should have contained the post-ceremony trust transport and document custody plan. Serena had removed the destination without changing the physical record that a destination once existed. Can you recover it? Not from the server. Then the binder proves a missing page, not what was on it. For now. Vivian examined the pressure impression on page 27. The printer stacked pages face down, while the ink was still warm. Under angled desk light, a shallow reverse impression appeared across the paper. She could make out 3 words from the missing sheet. Employee Benefit Trust. Damian's expression hardened. The Benefit Trust held 31% of the Moretti Logistics Group for long-term employees. Eleanor was its independent trustee. It could not be sold, pledged, or absorbed through marriage while she remained competent. If Serena gained guardianship, she would control the vote long enough to approve a merger with Vale Continental. The wedding was not merely attaching Serena to Damian's private holdings. It was opening a legal window into the workers' ownership. There are 212 families behind that trust, Vivian said. I know. Do you? Damian did not answer quickly. Vivian had administered benefit questions, emergency loans, and beneficiary corrections for people the board knew only as labor cost. She knew who had a child in college who had lost a spouse and who depended on the quarterly distribution for medication. The trust was not a percentage on Damian's balance sheet. It was the invisible half of her job. Serena needs 3 things, Vivian continued. A marriage, Eleanor's vote, and your signature on the merger acknowledgement. She will get none. She already moved the guardianship hearing. Eleanor entered the office, wearing her housekeeping coat like judicial robes. Then let us move faster. Before they could leave, the fire doors dropped across the employee corridor. The hotel alarm remained silent. On Vivian's screen, a security notice identified the red binder as contaminated material, requiring immediate destruction. Nolan's bypass code had returned to the network. 2 guards appeared beyond the glass partition wearing Moretti badges. One carried a locked disposal case. Damian called the security desk and received Serena's event coordinator, Mr. Moretti, the young man said with rehearsed concern. We have been told you may be acting under coercion. Damian ended the call. Serena has placed me inside my own security warning. She is not trying to defeat your authority, Vivian said. She is making the system reject it. The guards ordered them to place the binder inside the case. Damian stepped in front of Vivian. She touched his sleeve. If you threaten them, Serena's coercion story becomes true. What do you suggest? Let the system see the person it claims is missing. Eleanor walked to the glass and removed the housekeeping coat. Both guards recognized her. Vivian held up the paper bracelet, while Eleanor stated her full name, the date, and the fact that she had left the Vale facility voluntarily. One guard lowered his disposal case. The other reached for his radio. Do not report this through the wedding channel, Vivian said. Call the employee trust attorney using the number printed on your benefit card. The first guard understood before the second did. He had 11 years vested in the trust Serena intended to take. He opened the fire door manually. The system had rejected Damian's command. It obeyed Vivian because she knew what the people inside it stood to lose. As they moved toward the boardroom, Damian fell into step beside her rather than ahead. When this ends, he said, I want to discuss Chicago. Chicago is not a bargaining chip. I am beginning to understand that. At the next corner, Serena's voice came through every hotel speaker. She announced that Eleanor Moretti had been found but remained under the control of a disgruntled former assistant. Then she invited Vivian to enter the ballroom alone and prove otherwise. Serena's invitation was not meant for Vivian. It was meant for the 600 guests who would now interpret any hesitation as guilt. Damian reached for the ballroom door. Vivian caught his wrist. If you enter first, she will say, I manipulated you. If you enter alone, she will take the binder. Only if your people follow her orders. You just watched my security system reject me. Then this is where you decide whether authority means being obeyed or being accountable. Damian looked at her hand on his wrist. Vivian released him immediately. I will enter with your mother, she said. You will remain close enough to keep the room from removing us, but you will not explain the evidence. You are assigning me a role in my own ballroom. Yes. Eleanor adjusted the collar of her borrowed blouse. Try not to ruin it. Vivian and Eleanor entered through the service doors at the rear of the ballroom. Conversation broke in waves as guests recognized the missing matriarch. Serena stood on the raised platform in a white silk rehearsal gown, one hand resting on the silver case containing the marriage documents. Dr. Vale sat beside the trustees. Nolan was nowhere visible. Serena recovered from surprise quickly. "Thank God," she said. Vivian stepped away from her. Eleanor continued walking until she reached the center aisle. "I have spent 3 weeks listening to your uncle describe my own mind to me." Dr. Vale, "Sit down, Peter." Eleanor's command carried the memory of every board meeting she had ever controlled. He sat before realizing he had obeyed. Vivian placed the red binder on a small signing table. Serena looked at it once, and that glance confirmed she understood its danger. "That material was stolen from Damian's office," she said. "It was printed under my custody and removed before a false approval could replace it." Vivian replied, "You were dismissed for abandoning your duties. After your credential moved Eleanor into a Vale facility." Serena turned toward Damian. "Are you going to allow an employee to accuse your future wife in front of our families?" Every face followed her gaze. Damian stood beside the closed doors. For years, Vivian had watched him end dissent by speaking once. Now he said only, "You will listen to her." The status shift was immediate. Vivian was no longer an intruder requesting belief. She was the person Damian had ordered the room not to interrupt. She opened the binder to page 14 and explained the custody footer, the ceremonial cargo classification, and the local mileage hidden beneath the false Switzerland description. She used plain words and short sentences. The ballroom did not need to understand software. It needed to understand that a 12-mile trip could not begin in Zurich. Serena laughed softly. "An administrative inconsistency is not abduction." "Correct," Vivian said. "Eleanor's testimony establishes confinement." She turned the bracelet so the trustees could read the local facility name. The binder establishes who created the route that placed her there. Dr. Vale objected that Eleanor had entered voluntarily after signs of cognitive decline. Vivian asked him to identify the physician escort listed on the international route. He named a Swiss specialist. "There was no international route," Vivian said. "The mileage, fuel meal, and driver records all describe a local transfer." Dr. Vale changed his answer. That small contradiction mattered more than a dramatic confession would have. Serena moved toward the binder. "This performance is over." Damian did not touch her. He simply stepped between Serena and the table. "Not until Vivian says it is." For one dangerous second, affection and possession looked almost identical. Vivian met his eyes. "Move to the side, Damian." Shock crossed several faces. He moved. The room saw that he was protecting her right to speak, not claiming her evidence. Vivian showed the 32 punch marks and the missing page. She revealed the pressure impression naming the Employee Benefit Trust. Several longtime workers stood near the rear doors. The trust attorney entered with the 2 guards from the corridor and requested an immediate suspension of the vote. Serena's composure finally cracked. "A shadow on a page does not prove what the document said." "No," Vivian agreed. "It proves the page existed, was printed in this packet, and was removed after custody transferred to your dashboard." She had proven access, concealment, and target without inventing evidence the binder did not contain. Then Nolan appeared on the balcony with Vivian's work phone in his hand. "She is lying," he called. The screen displayed messages arranging Eleanor's removal and requesting payment from Vale Continental. Every message appeared to come from Vivian. Serena looked almost relieved. The apparent proof against her had become apparent proof against the assistant. Damian's deputy read the messages and stepped away from Vivian. 2 trustees demanded the binder be sealed. Nolan came down the stairs, slowly presenting himself as the loyal security chief who had uncovered betrayal. "Vivian planned to sell the trust after Chicago hired her," he said. "She took Mrs. Moretti to force the vote. The lie was effective because it used facts everyone already knew. Vivian had accepted the job, She had removed the binder. Eleanor had been found in her apartment. Damian looked at the phone, then at Vivian. This was the point where recognition either became trust or revealed itself as temporary convenience. "Did you send those messages?" he asked. Vivian heard the old hierarchy inside the question. She closed the red binder. "If you still need me to prove I did not betray you before you will stop the vote, then you have learned nothing tonight." She handed custody of the binder to the employee trust attorney, not to Damian. Then she walked out of the ballroom while her Chicago car waited downstairs. Vivian reached the hotel lobby before Damian caught up with her. He stopped 10 feet away instead of taking her arm or blocking the revolving door. That distance was the first apology he knew how to offer. "The vote has been suspended for 15 minutes, he said. "The trustees want an independent assessment of my mother. Give them one. Dr. Vale controls the approved physician list. Then your safeguards were designed to protect authority, not people." Damian accepted the sentence without defending himself. Outside, a black sedan waited to take Vivian to the airport hotel before her morning flight to Chicago. Her suitcase was already in the trunk. The operations director who hired her had sent a message promising a quiet office, written authority, and a staff large enough that competence would not be punished with endless availability. The offer was real. The departure was possible. No one in the Moretti organization controlled it. "I should have corrected Serena in the briefing," Damian said. Vivian looked back at him. Yes. He had expected anger, perhaps a speech about 7 years of loyalty. Her simple agreement left him nowhere to hide. "I should have known what you were carrying for this company. You should have built a company that did not require one invisible woman to carry it." Yes. The second agreement sounded less practiced. "I asked whether you betrayed me when the question should have been how my security chief manufactured the accusation. Yes. Is there any answer tonight that is not yes? You could ask whether I am leaving. Are you yes?" Damian lowered his gaze for a moment. He had lost negotiations worth hundreds of millions without feeling as powerless as he did beside that waiting car. Money could repair a contract. Command could replace an employee. Neither could make a woman choose a room where her dignity had been treated as optional. "I will not stop you," he said. "Good. But the guardianship vote will resume in 14 minutes. That is your consequence, not my chain." He nodded. "I know." The revolving doors opened behind him. 3 hotel workers came into the lobby wearing kitchen whites and maintenance grey. They were followed by a driver, a housekeeper, and the night payroll clerk. None approached Vivian. They gathered near the employee trust attorney who carried the red binder in a sealed, clear sleeve. The attorney announced that benefit distributions would be frozen until the missing page was resolved. A maintenance supervisor asked whether his wife's survivor payment would still be processed. The attorney could not promise it. Serena's attack had reached beyond Damian, beyond Eleanor, and beyond the wedding. It had reached people Vivian knew by name. Damian saw the change in her face. "Do not stay for me." She looked at him sharply. "I am not. I know that too." The trust attorney approached with the binder. "Miss Cole, I need a custody statement before you leave." Vivian signed the document on the hood of the waiting sedan. She recorded when the binder was printed, where it remained, who touched it, and why she removed it from the hotel. The attorney asked about the missing page. "The spine proves it existed," Vivian said. "The pressure impression identifies the trust but not the instruction. Can anyone else interpret the root format?" "Several people can read it." "That was not my question." Vivian recognized Eleanor's phrasing and nearly smiled. "No one else knows why I changed the post-ceremony custody codes last month." Damian looked up. "You changed them after Serena requested direct access to signed family documents. You never told me. I sent 3 approval memos. I did not see them. You marked operational correspondence for weekly summary." Another invisible warning had disappeared inside the convenience he demanded. The attorney turned page 27 beneath the lobby light. The reverse impression showed more than they had seen upstairs. Alongside Employee Benefit Trust was a partial code, TR31C. Damian interpreted it as Transport Route 31. Vivian did not. She had retired the TR prefix from vehicle route 6 months earlier. In the wedding packet, TR meant trustee reassignment. The missing page had not scheduled the movement of documents after the ceremony. It had scheduled the movement of authority. Serena intended to use Eleanor's guardianship vote to reassign the employee trust to a Vale-controlled custodian. Once the reassignment was recorded, cancelling the wedding would not automatically return control. "How long?" Damian asked. Vivian examined the final character. C means confirmation at closing. The rehearsal is not the closing. The attorney checked the wedding merger documents. Serena had quietly converted the rehearsal signing into a binding preliminary closing at 8:10. They had 9 minutes. Vivian could still enter the sedan. She could issue her statement from Chicago and let Damian's attorneys spend years reversing the transfer. The employees might lose distributions, but she would be safe employed and free of a system that had consumed her life. The driver opened her door. Vivian looked at the workers waiting beside the trust attorney. She remembered who had opened the laundry dock, who had believed Eleanor without requiring Damian's permission, and who would pay for a battle they had not created. She closed the car door without getting inside. "Keep the engine running," she told the driver. Damian did not smile. He understood that her return was not forgiveness. "What do you need from me? A microphone, the original merger document, and your promise not to speak until I finish." "Done. And if I stop the transfer, Chicago remains my decision." His answer came without hesitation. "Always." Vivian took the sealed binder from the attorney and walked back toward the ballroom. This time, Damian followed her. The ballroom doors had been locked under emergency trustee protocol. Damian could have ordered them broken. Vivian asked the employee trust attorney to use his statutory access instead. The distinction delayed them 40 seconds and preserved the legitimacy Serena was trying to steal. Inside, the preliminary closing had begun. Serena stood beside Eleanor's empty chair while Dr. Vale described her disappearance as proof of escalating confusion. Nolan had placed Vivian's phone on the signing table like a captured weapon. The trustees were preparing to recognize Serena as temporary guardian and Vale Continental as the new trust custodian. The trust attorney opened the doors and announced a formal evidence objection. Vivian entered, carrying the red binder in its sealed sleeve. The workers from the lobby came behind her, not as a crowd demanding favor, but as beneficiaries with a legal right to witness the transfer. Serena looked at the clock. "The objection period has closed. The closing time was concealed on a removed page," Vivian said. "A deadline created through concealed evidence cannot eliminate the right to challenge it." The attorney confirmed the rule. Serena turned to Damian. "This woman walked away from you 10 minutes ago. She was free to do so. And now you have brought her back to attack me." Damian stood at the side of the room, exactly where Vivian had instructed. She brought herself back. Vivian placed the binder under a document camera. The spine marks appeared on the ballroom screens. She asked the printer manager to count them aloud. 32. She asked Serena's event coordinator to count the pages. 31. Then she showed the reverse impression left by the missing page. The letters TR31C appeared faintly above Employee Benefit Trust. Serena called it an accidental printing shadow. Vivian explained that every page in a protected route packet had a custody footer and a physical sequence mark. The missing page had been printed at 2:11 under Serena's event session, passed through Nolan's security bypass, and removed before the packet reached Vivian. "That is an accusation built from abbreviations," Serena said. "Then let us expand them." Vivian opened the original merger document and found the custodian schedule, TR31C, appeared beside a clause transferring 31% of the company to Vale Continental upon preliminary closing. The same code existed in both documents because the missing route page had been designed to move the signed trust authority immediately after the vote. The binder had not merely tracked cars, it had tracked custody of every person and document required to make the transfer irreversible. That was its plot function. It identified the people, access target, and deadline behind the takeover. It also revealed why Vivian mattered. Only the woman who designed the codes could explain that TR no longer meant transport and C did not mean car. Nolan stepped forward. The binder came from her office. Correct. Her credential appears on Damian's tunnel route. A printed imitation of my credential appears there. Vivian turned to the final page. My legitimate approvals require a blue stairwell custody phrase that never prints on public copies but changes the spine pattern by 1 mark. The printer manager examined the page attributed to Vivian. The mark was absent. Nolan's bypass could print a visible credential, Vivian said. It could not reproduce private custody knowledge. Nolan pointed to the messages on her phone. She arranged the entire operation there. Vivian did not ask anyone to trust her denial. She asked the trust attorney to read the first timestamp, 4:53 that afternoon. Then she asked the printer manager to read the binder's production time, 4:31. The binder already contained the false tunnel route 22 minutes before the first message allegedly planning it. The messages could support the story Nolan built, but they could not have caused a page already in print. The main proof had changed meaning again. What first appeared to be a stolen schedule was a preserved record of the frame against Vivian. What appeared to be a missing transport page was the blueprint for a transfer of power. What appeared to be her approval was evidence that the security bypass could imitate names without reproducing custody. Eleanor rose from her chair. I am not confused, abducted, or represented by Serena Vale. Dr. Vale tried to interrupt. The independent physician Damian had requested entered with the family attorney and confirmed Eleanor was oriented, informed, and capable of refusing treatment. The confirmation supported Eleanor's present capacity, but the red binder remained the evidence of the scheme. Serena looked toward Nolan. That single glance exposed the alliance more clearly than panic would have. Nolan moved toward a side exit. The 2 employee trust guards closed it. Damian gave no violent order. He told them to preserve Nolan's phone, escort him to the hotel legal office, and wait for outside investigators. Serena removed her engagement ring and placed it on the table before Damian could ask. You cannot prove I knew what Nolan intended. Vivian opened page 14. Your credential initiated Eleanor's route. She opened the missing page impression. Your event session initiated the trust transfer. She opened Damian's false tunnel route. Nolan's bypass concealed both and created a target under my name. She looked directly at Serena. He provided access, but every action purchased the future you were about to sign. The clock reached 8:10. No trustee signed. The preliminary closing failed. The failure did not erase the altered filings or restore the workers' trust by itself. It only stopped Serena's deadline and returned the next decision to people who could make it in daylight. Vivian kept the binder sealed while the trust attorney recorded the failed closing, ensuring that victory did not become another undocumented exercise of Moretti power. The first consequence was silence, not celebration. 600 guests had watched a bride lose a wedding, but the people whose futures depended on the trust understood that something larger had survived. The employee trust attorney formally rejected the custodian transfer. Eleanor revoked every temporary authorization issued during her confinement. The trustees suspended Vale Continental from the merger process and referred the altered filings for independent investigation. Dr. Vale was removed from Eleanor's care pending review by the medical board. Nolan was held in the legal office until outside authorities arrived. Serena requested a private conversation. Damian refused to make public misconduct a private misunderstanding. You used my name to make systems obey you, he said. You used my mother's confinement to make consent irrelevant, and you used Vivian's work because you believed nobody would value the woman behind it. Serena looked toward Vivian. She wanted you from the beginning. The insult was designed to reduce professional authority back into romantic competition. Vivian answered before Damian could. I wanted written approvals, adequate staff, and one uninterrupted weekend. A few employees laughed, releasing the pressure without weakening the moment. You mistook competence for devotion because that mistake made exploitation convenient. Serena's face hardened. And what do you become now? Vivian rested one hand on the red binder. The person who decides whether this system deserves to continue. The old public label finally broke. She was no longer the assistant who had crowded a photograph or stolen a folder. The board members waited for her assessment before moving to the next item. Damian waited too. Vivian recommended an immediate separation between wedding security, medical, and executive credentials. She required two-person authorization for any human being placed inside a cargo or document protocol. She required benefit trust notices to go directly to worker representatives rather than through Damian's office. She also required an independent review of every order carrying Damian's digital signature during the previous 6 months. That review may expose your own mistakes, one trustee warned him. Damian looked at Vivian. That is the point. The board adopted the emergency controls before anyone left the ballroom. Then Damian removed his signature from the wedding and merger documents. He did not tear them for spectacle. He marked them void, dated the decision, and gave the copies to the trust attorney. At 9:30, Vivian collected her suitcase from the waiting sedan. The Chicago driver reminded her that the airport hotel remained available. Damian stood beneath the hotel canopy, while cold rain silvered the street. He had changed from a man who expected her to remain into one who understood that asking carried the risk of refusal. "The board wants to offer you Chief Operating Officer," he said. "You are the board, not for this decision." He handed her a written resolution, already signed by the independent trustees and the employee representative. The role included a voting seat authority over executive routing power to reject unsafe directives and the right to appoint her own staff. Her employment could not be terminated by Damian alone. Her compensation was separated from any personal relationship with a Moretti. It was structural power, not a romantic reward. Vivian read every page. "Who wrote the independence clause? My mother dictated it." Eleanor called from the doorway. "He required the part about not firing you alone." Damian almost smiled. "I am capable of learning. Learning is not the same as changing. Then measure me by what happens after tonight." Chicago still offered peace, distance, and a clean beginning. The Moretti role offered authority to repair a system that had failed hundreds of people, but it also kept Vivian near a man whose silence had helped diminish her. She did not decide beneath the canopy. "I will give the board an answer in 72 hours. Fair. During those hours you will not send gifts, drivers, flowers, or employees to persuade me. Can I call about the position once? And after you decide," Vivian met his eyes. "If I accept, you wait 30 days before asking me anything personal." "Why 30? "Because I need to know whether you respect my authority when it is inconvenient. And if you decline, you may ask me to dinner once, and you must accept the answer." Damian nodded. "Those are your conditions. Those are my boundaries. I accept them." Vivian went to Chicago for the weekend. Damian called only once, and the conversation lasted 11 minutes because he had prepared 3 operational questions and did not invent a 4th. She accepted the position on Monday, after the employee trustees added a removal clause requiring their vote. Her first act was not to redecorate or replace the nameplates Serena had mocked. She hired 2 coordinators, created paid on-call rotations, and prohibited any executive from treating permanent availability as loyalty. Her second was to archive the red binder independently after every route was reviewed. Her third was to take Friday evening off. Damian spent the next month obeying decisions he disliked, answering audit questions he would once have dismissed, and correcting people who called Vivian his assistant. He did not perform repentance with expensive gestures. He practiced accountability in meetings where nobody would applaud him. On the 30th day, he came to her office at 5:45 and remained outside the open door. "May I ask the personal question now?" Vivian closed the operations report. "You may ask." "Dinner in a restaurant. Neither family owns with a car you can leave in whenever you choose. That is several questions disguised as one. I had a month to make mistakes." She let him wait long enough to understand that waiting was part of the answer. "Dinner," she said. He offered his hand but did not touch her until she placed hers in it. Their partnership did not begin when Damian found his mother behind Vivian's door. It began when he stopped treating every door as something his power entitled him to open. Eleanor later said the cancelled wedding saved the family business. Vivian knew the deeper truth. The business survived because the people once kept outside the photograph were finally given authority inside the frame. And if someone's loyalty keeps your entire world standing, do you reward their sacrifice or do you change the system that required it?